Ladies and gentlemen, it is. And today's video is a very, very special one. Now, I know I do this all the time, but we can never forget how we started. From the powerful, quick, super fast, but scary Nanorobot D6 Plus, to the far more controllable, comfortable, not for too long, kinda ugly and really slow beach cruiser that moved on to the first build from the ground up, extra torquey, extra fast, good looking, and only comfortable until about 10 miles, Project Flash. Until I killed it. So then I asked myself, what's something that I can build that can stay alive? And that was Project SB. It was the style that I've always loved in two-wheeled vehicles. It was comfortable, it was even quicker, even faster, more range, until I realized I got scammed. So I said, you know what, let's smarten up. I can build all this bike, why don't I build my own battery? Built my own battery for the first time ever, and goddamn was it absolutely beautiful. It gave me everything I needed from this bike. Until the controller started overheating. 201 Fahrenheit. Wow. So then I looked down and realized, I put the controller in the oven. So let me move the controller somewhere where it can get a nice fresh breath of air, where it can breathe. And that created a clearance issue, making the bike feel even more janky than it already was. So with all these bikes having these problems, I just simply needed something that could give me all in one, from the style and look of the bike, from being able to ride more than 10 miles without it feeling like my bony wrists are gonna snap, being able to ride the bike thinking I have suspension until my rear tire bounces off the controller box and makes it feel like my spine's gonna snap, or I'm gonna send flying off the seat. That is the one thing I just kinda can't stand about this bike, this rough suspension and these dumbass headlights. Something that can just go a little further since I go extra far out these days. Something that can keep up with the bigger bikes, the big gas bikes, without having to struggle or lag behind a little too much. And honestly, last but not least, something that can ride around without trying to beat my ass or beat its own ass by having these clearance issues, bouncing off of its own tires, denting up the gas tank, just clearance issues and this issue everywhere, chain rubbing. I just need something that could get around town smoothly without any major struggles. And that's when I came to two conclusions. Project SB was supposed to look something like an e-bike, at least close to it, like a Surron or like Project Flash, aka like the Onyx RCR, rest in peace to them. But it ended up looking like a small motorcycle. It definitely was not an e-bike. So I said, you know what? If we're gonna go motorcycle, let's go motorcycle. Let's get a motorcycle. So I went and built a motorcycle. Now, one last thing I do want to say, and no, I'm not trying to waste you guys' time, but I've done two builds in this channel, this one being the third one, and I'm kind of starting to realize that the unboxing section of these videos are kind of pointless. Why show me unbox every last piece I bought for this build when you're literally going to see it throughout the video as I build the bike? So with that being said, I'm definitely not going to do this part of the video anymore, especially for future builds. I guess the only thing I will show is this reciprocating saw I bought. I bought a Craftsman reciprocating saw. Absolutely needed one for this build, but they decided to send me an old one. So I had to send it back to Amazon and go to Lowe's to get what I paid for. But now that we have a reciprocating saw, it's now officially time to get to work. First things first, let's chop up the unneeded parts in this frame using our new tool and our new blade. See if this is any good. I know I'm blocking the hell out of the camera, but I was struggling to keep the frame still since I really don't have proper tools to keep this frame in place. LED strip on here. So now we're starting on the motor mount, and apparently I was doing a lot of things wrong with the motor mount because it kept giving me problems. Now we'll explain the problems as we build the motor mount and show it, but I'll also be doing that because some of these problems actually occurred at the end of the build, and I don't want to have to end the video off in a certain way. I want to end it off nice and smooth. So I'll explain the problems as we build the motor mount. What I'm doing here is I'm cutting pieces off of this wall here because I kind of didn't realize that the round corners on the frame were a little too much for the sharp edges on here, so I had to cut this down a bit. I even had to smoothen the frame out a little bit and just get everything nice and neat so I can properly sit this plate welded on the frame. So battery died on me on the phone, didn't realize it. Went to quickly charge it up, but didn't get to show y'all me tack welding the actual mount onto the frame, but we're about to do now. As you can see, I got the chain set up with the rear wheel on. This is pretty much lined up, so we're about to start welding on these notches. The notches that'll hold the motor down. So before we go anywhere else, let's talk about the problems I was having with the motor mount. The first one was user error. Now my first build, I used this little welder, and I've used that from the first to the second build, and about halfway I used my dad's bigger welder. Now my dad just gave me this big welder for my birthday because he said he's just not going to use it. He doesn't have time to do any of this welding stuff, and I'm always out here building these bikes, so I could most definitely put some use on it. But when he gave it back to me, I forgot the settings that I put it to for the last build when I started kind of using it a little bit. And I changed the settings, and the settings I changed them to were not good. So number one, for some reason, the right tall mount just kept changing positions. I don't know why, I don't know how. I would weld it on with the motor in place just like this, and all of a sudden I need to put the motor back on, and that right one is in a whole new position, and the hole is not matching up to the motor mount. I kept having to re-weld it over and over and over again because for some reason it just weirdly kept changing position, and I was getting extremely confused to what the hell was going on. Then eventually, if you move back around to this little short notch on the left on the other side here, during test riding, number one, the motor was not in the right place. It was too far forward. I had to scoot it back. I still have to make a little lip, a little floor to push the old notches back so we can mount the other side of the motor. So now that the motor's pushed back, I went to take it on another test ride, and it was completely fine, no more chain rubbing. So I got back to work, got back to the yard, time flew by, the bike was completely done. I went to test it in gear 3, trying to play around with its torque, and the motor jumped. I looked down, the short left notch was completely broken, and the tall right notch was bent. Now I'm extremely defeated. Working on this bike was so exhausting. I was so glad it was done, but it turns out it wasn't done yet. Had to take it back in the yard. I decided to remake an entirely new short notch so I don't have to weld onto old weld. And I had to completely remake a new right notch because trying to cut it off a little bit so I can re-weld it and change its angle because it was bent, it decided it was going to break off completely on its own. So I got sick and tired of that, and I made a new tall right notch. But put it all together, welded it back together, it's all good. No problems after that, got a proper weld. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened with the motor mount. So now that we know that's what happened, I can finally end the video off smoothly like I wanted to. But now we're here. We're chopping up the front of the frame. Due to the battery that I want for it, this frame needs to be a little more square. Let's just say that much. So now that our frame is all squared up, it's time to work on the battery box.
of this was to leave a small middle piece so we can bend it and shape in place.
So before I go too crazy spot welding all these panels and plates and notches onto each other, I do need to remember to get the paint off of the frame so I can actually weld the box to the frame. So just in case I forget, like I always do, I'm going to go ahead and do that first, and then we're going to get back to the battery/controller box. And now that we got that done, let's get back to the battery/controller box.
block right here. Need the holes to be bigger to fit these screws that I have. Alright, battery's getting real low, so it's probably gonna be the last thing I record. So we're drilling holes in a little plate the lock is gonna go into. Phone's an ultra low on battery. I'm at 14%. Let's see if we can get this recorded. Alright, so I'm back out here, and I only got two things I'm really trying to get done today. And that's the radiator mounting. But before the radiator mounting, I want to do the key switch. Now originally, like my last bike, I was going to do the key switch on the panels, but I kind of thought of an idea, but I thought of this idea too late. And that is where instead, because of how wide this is and how narrow that is up top, I could either put a key switch here or here. Whichever side I decide to go with, I could put the key switch there. And I think that would be actually really nice. But I absolutely hate drilling with my drill, but I think that's what I'm going to have to do. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to do that, and it might take a while. Alright, build frustration, something I typically never show in any of my builds. So that hole I was trying to drill for the key switch, yeah, this is how it's looking so far. As I was doing that, it started bending down a little bit, and I expected that. I should have known because these are spot welds, but I forgot that spot weld down there specifically for the controller. The one bar was extra weak, and I forgot to make it a little stronger. It was the main reason why I was bending down, so I took the bottom, I tried to bend it up, and everything popped up in the air. So the ceiling that I was trying to drill the hole in, I just broke it off, might as well. But I can finally use the drill press to get the hole that I want and to do what I want. And I'm gonna grind these down and then properly weld them. And once I do that, it's time to get started on that up there anyways. And in order to properly get started on that, I need the box welded to the frame. So yeah, I'm gonna make sure I do that so that doesn't happen again. So finally got this thing tack welded on after a lot of frustration. But not only is it tack welded on back to normal with the panels on, so we know that it properly fits with the panels, I got the key mount exactly where I want it. So what's happening here is, in case I didn't show y'all, I had made a kind of a mistake in making these ceilings, not realizing that I am putting them behind these angled flat bars. So with me doing that, the ceiling has a gap when I close the panel, and that is currently why I cut these two things out. I'm going to spot weld them on, and then when I'm done and get them in position, I'll fully weld them so I can have those gaps nice and closed. And in case I get caught in rain or a lot of dust, it's not so easy for the rain and dust to get in there because I have these large cracks in. So we're closing them off with these short little tabs.
So now that the main part of the battery / controller box is done, I just want to add something to the front of it to fill it up, you know, not leave it empty and ugly. But it's not just going to be there just for looks. This is where our fan's going to be. Absolutely gotta have cooling when you live in Nevada. It gets hot out here.
literally have a family of a bunch of weird ass birds on my wall right now.
So I got this aluminum plate here. What this is originally for PCs. It's like it allows you to install front fans to a case that doesn't have front fan mounting. But instead, of course, I'm using this for the bike, and the holes that you would mount the panel or plate onto, just not big enough. I need them to be a little bigger, so I'm making these 4 holes bigger. And I don't think I got this recorded. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember, so I'm just going to say it now. The 2 holes you see in the middle where you would mount the fans, I didn't make them bigger, but I ended up making them one big open line so I can adjust the fans up or down a little bit any way I want them for particular reasons that I will see soon.
Alright, now we got some gaps to fill. I gotta fill up the top gaps, the bottom gaps, and make a little plate to cover up the very top of this mount. Now I'm going to use this little thin thing right here to fill up this gap.
as Molly the builder here in fast-paced time fully welds up and completes and finishes the battery slash controller slash cooling compartment, voiceover Molly's gonna let y'all know that it's now time to move on to the next piece of framework that needs to be done for this bike. So now what I'm doing here is I'm taking this gas tank and I'm about to completely cut the entire floor out. And I'm going to be putting the 12-volt system under the gas tank. But not only going to take the floor and cut it out, we're going to weld it to the top of the frame. So that'll be what the 12-volt systems and the terminal blocks will sit on. But now that that part's out the way, I'm going to finish up the gas tank by covering up these open holes since I did cut the floor out. And the gas tank will be sitting up real tall since the VT does not have a singular bar support at the top of the frame, if that's what you would call it. And then for the mounting holes of the gas tank, because this is actually not even a gas tank for the VT600, this is a Harley Sportster gas tank. It's a little short and I don't want to have to create these extra long tabs. And because I have plans for what I want to do and how I want to mount up the seat mount, I'm going to go ahead and take the holes that are already on the frame and I'm going to tap them. And I'm going to use those holes to mount the gas tank. So the seat and the gas tank will not share the same bolt hole. Now it's time to get started on the extra bits and pieces that we have for this bike. And I'm sure y'all can already tell there's a little more done to this one, seeing that right after we got done with the main framework, we instantly started chopping up the gas tank. But that's already more than we've done in the previous builds. But what we're about to do right here is the fender. Now I wanted to do the seat mount first, but because the way I'm going to have to do the seat mount, it'll kind of be in the way of me welding the main mount for the fender. So we're going to go ahead and do this fender first. We got the fender mount, we got the bungees. I got extra bungees for a little something I'm trying to slap on the fender. And a little extra something I'm trying to slap on the fender. And then after we do the fender though, we're going to go ahead and move the seat mount. So I guess I'm going to include the seat mount within the frame accessory part of this video. So I didn't quite record the first initial tack welds of the seat mount to the back of the frame because for the longest amount of time I was just staring at it trying to figure out how am I going to do this while having the seat on without setting the seat on fire. You may ask, why don't you just take the seat off? Because as you can tell, the mount is slightly slanted. I needed it to be in this position. If it was flat, it wouldn't go in the seat properly at all. It needed to be slanted due to the fact that the frame slants up a little bit, but I was able to get it to work. And I guess here's the initial full welds since it really doesn't need that much. Now it's time to get back to working on the real accessories. And I'm sure that was one that y'all were staring at in the thumbnail, and that's the Sissy Bar.
Alright, so I cut out the little mounts to the Sissy Bar, but this one's it's a small minor thing. It's nothing crazy, but just kind of not feeling it. And I'm no professional, so I'm trying to make this look as good as possible with this entire bike. And that is one, how tall it is, and two, even if I do short it down, I kind of feel like it would look better if it would sit straight up. So as y'all can see, I already got it marked, so I'm gonna cut it down with the angle grinder, hopefully try to imitate that the best way I can with the second one, and then we'll see how that looks. I think it'll look better.
So again, this Sissy Bar being from TC Bros, and TC Bros really only make stuff for Harleys. The one metric bike they will make stuff for is the Yamaha X650. With this being a Honda Shadow, aka none of those bikes, as you can tell we have a very large gap between the bungie and the Sissy Bar itself. And no, it's not a symmetry problem because I put the fender on wrong or very off. It's simply just the very odd dimensions of the VT600 frame and swing arm. Shit, best example like I say is, if you're not here because you know about e-bikes already and you've never seen an e-bike like this, but you're here because you love the VT600, and this is more than likely the first time you've ever seen an electric one, you were interested in the build, I'm going to very assume that you know who Lane Split Boulevard is. If you don't, I'd be shocked. But even watching a lot of his builds throughout this entire build I was doing here, he even had the same, I guess, problem with it being off. Again, it's just simply the dimensions of the VT600. Very odd. So as you can tell, I gotta weld a very large gap. Let's see if I can weld in between the lines. Alright, and would you look at that, I got it done. Now the next one will be pretty easy because this one is closer, so it'll be a simple weld job.
Alright, so there's no way I'm going to properly get this under the drill press, so sadly I have to use my impact drill, which means this is probably going to take forever. And the Sissy Bar is on. Sir, nice and sturdy.
Alright, so you may ask, why am I installing forks right now? Well, if any returning viewer has seen my old bobber build from a year ago, you would know that there's dents in the front of my gas tank because I never realized that the gas tank was just slightly too big. Yes, that tiny gas tank was slightly too big for that bike. So when I would turn left and when I would turn right, the forks would dink on the gas tank and I had very nasty scratches and dents. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have that same problem, because if I did, that means I sadly got to go back to work chopping these spot welds off and extending the front one back a little bit and making the back one short a little bit so this gas tank doesn't get dinked up.
Alright, moment of truth. I have a very strong feeling that this is indeed going to dink the shit out of the gas tank. It just seems too close. But, here we go. Should have did this before I welded it up, to be honest. Oh my god. Look how close it is.
Alright, next up is the foot pegs. Now these foot pegs are heavily, straight up inspired by Lane Split Boulevard. Again, I was watching a lot of Lane Split Boulevard during this entire build. These are right here, they call them the mid pegs. I think they look cool, they seem like they're fairly comfortable. Hopefully they will be, and I won't regret them. So because of the way I'm using these OEM foot pegs, this bottom half is just not going to be needed. It's just going to be lingering there and looking kind of ugly. So I'm going to go ahead and chop it off.
Gave it those real nice round edges. Now it's ready for welding. Foot pegs are on. Hopefully the spot welds don't break while I try to see how these feel.
A few moments later.
Now my mid pegs are a tad bit high due to the way I had to do them. Usually people have theirs a little lower, but I'm not that tall, so should be fine for me.
So now that I've re-welded my foot pegs and now they're fully welded and perfectly fine, it's now time to see how short we need to cut the linkage so we can have our rear brakes working.
we go. That is how that will work. But the last thing I need to do is a part of this little brake system here. What is that? I need to cut out a little spacer for the actual brake pedal.
Alright, so our next accessory. This one right here is important. I think you're gonna know what this one is, but if you don't know, you'll see around the end of the video when we start putting this bike together. So I had just thought of an idea, alright? I'm gonna go ahead and take the very front bottom end of the frame I cut off earlier into this build, and I'm gonna chop the foot peg mounts off. I'm gonna call them bungs for now on, but I'm gonna chop the bungs off, and I'm gonna weld them on top of the battery box. The purpose for that is, instead of usually getting my headlight I always get with the turn signals built in it, I thought about getting some separate turn signals, the same ones I have on my old bobber, but for the front. I thought it would look pretty cool, but not only that, I have another idea, another design that'll need either one of these to be welded on in order for it to work. And this one's simple. I'm just trying to get this VT600 OEM headlight mount to work with this new headlight housing. Now, I know it's starting to feel like I'm doing a whole lot more chatting. Well, that's because I am, but that's also because a lot of the things that we're doing right now, they're very simple, so we're getting to them pretty fast, and we're moving on to the next pretty goddamn fast. But we're doing here, this one I was meant to do with my original bobber build, last year's build, and that was a extension cable I had got when I built my first battery for the original bobber after we got scammed. And let's just say I got lazy. Number one, I didn't feel like cutting out the bottom of the gas tank. It wasn't easy doing that with this gas tank. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna do it this time with this build. Got the bottom of the gas tank cut open. We got the 12-volt system under there. But not only did I want the bottom of the gas tank cut open for that, y'all know where I'm going. We're gonna take this cable, we're gonna make holes so we can screw it in. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is the same way you would remove your gas cap to fill your motorcycle up with some gas, the same way I'm gonna remove my gas cap to fill my bike up with electricity. Now we're gonna move on to the handlebar. So if anybody's seen the video I did a long while ago on my original bobber project SB, I had these big black ape anchors that I ended up switching out for some silver ones, and I said I was gonna use the big tall black ones for a future build, which I was talking about this build. I had already had this frame at the time, but I ended up putting those handlebars on the frame when I had the rolling chassis up. Wasn't feeling it. I don't know, they're just still too tall for this bike. And then I had bought these handlebars that you currently see right here, and they look good, but I had a few problems. They're 1 inch. Since this being a VT600, they have to be 1 inch. That forces me to use a twist throttle, which I'm not a fan of, especially with the power this bike's gonna have. Whoa! And number two, I started eventually kind of not liking these handlebars. I don't know, I just wasn't feeling them after a while. And then I came across this video. Oh man, I forgot the name of it, but another lane split boulevard video. Man, it had a VT600, it was green, he had it stanced, but he had some very narrow ape hangers. They weren't too tall, they weren't too wide, and I thought they looked great. So what if I just try to make my own narrow ape hangers? And the best part about that is, if I use these two handlebars, I chop them up, take the middle piece, from the 1-inchers so I can have them on the clamps, and weld the rest of the 7/8 bar to the 1-inch so I can have 7/8 and use my typical thumb throttle and mountain bike grips. That'll be perfect. So that is exactly what I did. So they're still very tall. I kind of just want to see how they would look if they're still 16 inches tall. I'm thinking maybe they looked a little ugly before because of how wide they were. Honestly, I'm still not feeling them. There's only one dude I saw that made them look good, that tall. It was on Instagram. He had maybe it was the hardtail stance. I don't know, but I couldn't get it to work. Personally, I want them to look pretty much as similar as possible to the picture I showed you. So that's around 10 to 11 inches tall, and I think they look a lot better this way.
All right, next we can finally work on taking this wheel off so we can make the spacer. All right, so I found a way to get up in here nice and easily. Slide that axle back. Slide the measuring tape behind there. Now we're on the bearing. Slide it in. These fit perfectly within each fork. Now look at the top. If I'm correct, that is 1 3/8. All right, tubing finally came in. Voila, the perfect cut. Alright, this is indeed a risky game that I am playing here. I'm not seeing any raindrops yet, and I feel like I might have a little bit of time to get something more finished. So let's cut this wall right here. Looks cool and all with the flat top. It's got its little shape design to fit in between the frame, but if I can just get those bends that I'm looking for. Now that I got the bends that I need, it looks like this. Now, I did do the cuts a little bit wrong. It was supposed to be one slant, but I kind of did them too close. But honestly, I'm not mad at this at all. This looks good to me. Looks real good. so I just made a series of notches here, alright? I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get them in recorded because I'm in a little bit of a rush. I kind of know what I'm doing, so I don't mind rushing it as long as I get it done properly. But I'm in a rush because it's Saturday right now. Honestly, I'm trying to chill for the rest of the day, get done with this stuff earlier than I usually would stop. Not only is that, my parents trying to order some pizza, so I'm trying to chill and eat. But all I need to do now is put a nice hole in here. Oh yeah, and the rain is on and off. It's like sprinkles. This is scaring me. I really don't want to get caught in full rain, especially with my tools out here. I cannot afford more tools. Finally done.
Now it's finally time to move on. Yeah, I do not know how long it took me to finish this stupid little thing due to the problems it kept giving me. Build frustrations. If I'm remembering correctly, this thing actually got me the most frustrated. Not that it was hard to, since I have anger issues. Something I don't really talk about. I mean, it's no reason to. I'm not going to talk about it like I'm proud of it. But anyways, it's time to move on to the tail light mount. Tail light / license plate mount.
Now for the last thing before we start welding, I gotta go ahead and bend this headlight mount flat. Because I'm gonna just use my very tiny angle gunner blade, cut the sides and make it easier. Next up is welding these little bungees for the fender seat.
Alright, so we're about at that time of the build where we're prepping the bike up for test riding. But I didn't really feel like showing all that because goddamn, I didn't truly realize how long this video is going to be as I'm currently editing it, doing this voiceover right now. So what I will show, I'm gonna skip past all that shit. You're just gonna skip to the part where I start assembling my brakes with the new brake line and my new brake lever and caliber and whatever the fuck it's called, I can't remember. And now we're about to start on that little thing I was hitting at earlier that I'm gonna be creating that's also gonna hook up to the front turn signal bungees.
There we go. Mountain's done. Should look cleaner when I paint it. It's got a couple of weld bubbles that I can't get off. But it looked good. And should do what I wanted to do.
Alright, so I want to bring it back to the foot peg assembly. Not the full foot peg assembly, but just the foot pegs and the brake pedal. Because for the foot pegs, number one, could not find any good looking foot pegs for the VT600. They're all kind of basic, kind of ugly, or just way too overly priced. And as you can see, these ones right here are ugly as fuck! So what I'm about to do here is chop these mounts off. I found some Harley ones off of Amazon. They happen to be steel and they happen to be weldable, the right type of weldable steel. So I welded those on so I can use any type of Harley foot peg I want, because apparently only Harleys are allowed to have cool looking foot pegs. Out with the old and in with the new. And now to number two, this one's extremely simple, just taking the brake pedal and cutting off the actual pad itself, replacing it with a simple notch so I can install any pad or brake pedal that I want. And of course, you guys will see the one that I decide to go with very soon. And now it's finally time to take it on the road. Will it cruise or will I bruise? Let's find out.
Wish I had a light hooked up so I could see a little bit. The rest of the gears are weak, so we're gonna stay in gear 3, which is 250 amps. I'm using scan battery, so we are not using the big battery in this bike. This bike kind of scares me a little bit to turn because this thing is so heavy. I gotta get used to it. Already did a little bit off camera, so front brakes work good, but they got air bubbles. I can feel the brake doing this as I'm holding it down. Rear brake, drum brake, surprisingly locks up the wheel. But 250 amps, it still moves this big boy. It'll be 40 pounds heavier when I put the proper battery in.
It's almost crazy, like that motorcycle is him.
I'll do one more pull off.
Now, if you wonder what the nasty chain noise is, remember this was when the test ride was done and I realized that the motor was not in proper position and I had to re-advise the motor mount and move the motor back a little bit. So here's a clip when I did that, and you can hear the chain sounds a lot healthier.
Wheels look fine. Front wheel does.
And
the bike's not cutting out or nothing. That's good. So like I said, we're gonna take this thing out on the street, and the road that they fixed, they tore it up again. Oh man, it feels good to be on the road again. It's not gonna go too crazy, but I just want to feel these bumps and check my welds. Here we go. Woo, that is rough, but you know what? That was comfortable. Alright, we're gonna stay on this road for a minute, because after this bump, I'm gonna check. Oh, I forgot I don't have a headlight, so this is a bit dangerous. Looks like the bump is right here. Slow down a little bit. Doesn't sound like anything's about to break. Now I'm gonna check some welds.
alright, so you can't see a goddamn thing because this GoPro is just not good with the low light footage. This GoPro 9, but the welds looked fine until I went on one more trip, and yeah, I took a tumble. I'm lying. Everything was just fine. Nothing went wrong. So I took this thing back in the yard, broke it down, because now it's time to paint. It's time to clean this thing up and paint. All right, it's time to paint. now that I'm done painting, man, it looks good. While it's gonna be sitting here curing for a week, I decided to get some extra things done, like cleaning the wheels, and didn't do that great of a job. The dirt on there was really stuck on. I mean, it's a little shinier, but now the wheels look a little dumber with all this white shit on them. Try using wax, didn't go out good. So while the paint cures, let's do something better, like electrical work. So we're talking electrical, we gotta start with the battery build. I'm lying, the battery's done way before I ever got started on the bike. This was an absolutely monstrous battery to build. If you want to check out the full battery build, I'll have that in the description. Alright, so now it's time to get started on the 12-volt system. I got the DC to DC converter right here. I got some extra wires I'm going to use from an old DC to DC converter. I got my 3 little connectors. I got the female connector to go here. And I got some extra bits that I'm going to need. Since this one isn't the same as the old 72-volt one I would usually use, which was this, where you had multiple different cables, this only has 3. The red one being the positive to the battery, the yellow one being positive to the accessories. But the black cable is negative to both battery and the 12-volt accessories. It's pretty simple on how I plan on do that. I just pretty much need, once again, 2 black cables to come out. One will have terminal connectors with the yellow connector for the accessories. The other will be hooked up to this XT60. The reason I'm doing that is this will connect right into the charge cable of the battery. Anyone new who may not know too much about this electric stuff, and you may ask, why would I want to plug into the charge cable? Isn't that where you can only charge? Well, batteries are actually quite simple when it comes to their charge and discharge. It's pretty much just like using your controller. You take this AA battery, you got your positive and your negative, and you're either going to take that and put it in your Xbox controller to discharge, aka use the power, or you're going to take the negative and the positive and put it in your charger to charge. It's the same thing, no matter where it is, it uses the same positive and negative to charge. So the only reason why you see battery packs with 2 different cables is that's because more than likely you're not going to use the same cable as you would use for your discharge. Like this big cable here, I'm not using this to charge. So I made 2 different cables, one for charging specifically and one for discharging specifically. But if we look down here, you can go ahead and see that both positive are connected to the same thing. All right, it's my battery positive connection. I didn't have enough carbon tape to fully cover that up. So now that you get that, let me get this started. Honestly, the complication I'm having here is how am I going to get 2 cables to fit in this tiny piece. Yeah, a tiny piece right there. Really tiny.
it is done. We get all our connections, the 2 terminal cables right here, the main battery cable right here. To set it up, all I need is my terminal block. Go ahead and slap on the negative, slap onto the positive. All right, go ahead and bolt those down. Just finger tighten them down to the actual DC-DC converter itself. And now, before we plug that in, we're gonna plug this in here. I'm gonna tell you why in a minute. But then, moment of truth, you plug in this right here. Heard the pop. So we got power, and now we're connected.
And now the reason for the splitter, as you can tell, we got our discharge cable will obviously be plugged up to the controller, and we got our charge cable, which is now plugged up to the DC-DC. But I still need a way to plug up the extension cable so you can charge from the gas tank. All this stuff will be under the gas tank. This is where I will show you how I wire up the Tusker wiring harness with the tail lights, headlights, and maybe extra blinkers that I decided to get, especially this time around because I was trying something different. I love the Tusker wiring harness because it's simple, easy plug and play, but to be honest, I always hated how the handlebar control switch looked. It was really ugly, basic, cheap looking, and never even matched the colors of my bike. So I was trying something different with these little buttons right here. But of course, it was a very tedious job because now I'm not using the plug and play switch. That means I have to figure out what each and every wire does and where it goes to on the wiring harness. And that took a long ass time. I think I started at 11 a.m. I didn't get done until 2 a.m. So if my math is mathing, that was about 13 hours of work. And this is where things took a turn. It turned into build frustrations. Pretty much long story short, after 13 hours of doing this work, one of the switches were bad. All of them didn't have the best reviews on Amazon, but I was taking the risk. So one of them ended up coming bad. So next morning I sent it back. Then about another day later, I reordered hoping for a better switch. Switch arrived, soldered it on properly the way it's supposed to be, because number one, none of these switches came soldered onto their little pins the way they're supposed to. Plugged it up, and 13 hours of work went straight in the drain when the button shortened the entire wiring harness. And boy, when I tell you I was frustrated, I'm not even gonna sit here and lie to y'all. When that happened, I said, fucking swear to God!
Pretty sure my wiring harness burnt out due to this stupid fucking switch.
So now at this point, I am frustrated, and I said, fuck all this shit. I sent everything back, the wiring harness, the turn signals, the original taillights I was going to use, at least the extra ones for rear turn signals. And I'm glad I did anyways, because that saved me $129. But I thought to myself, let me just keep it clean anyways. I wanted to do this for my last build, I just wasn't sure if it was a good idea. But this is a bobber. Let's keep the handlebars clean. We don't need the extra shit, just a headlight and a tail light, and that's all that matters. Shit, I get around with my Surron just having a headlight and tail light, and I have no issues. So now I'm going to show you the wiring harness I made and how it works for the headlight and the tail light and the 3 buttons that do work.
And there we go. That's the connection that is needed. So to give y'all a decent understanding of what you're looking at here, so we have our main on and off switch cable right here. So the positive goes straight to the terminal block, the 12-volt system. The negative goes from a splitter back out to the 12-volt source. That being so, everything hooked up to the wiring harness that needs a negative plug now has it from this blue side of the splitter. The yellow is the next positive connection when the button is pressed down, and that gives positive power to everything needed on the wiring harness. The low beam, high beam switch, the positive connection to our brake switch, all the way back to the needed positive connection for the tail light. And because this is a bobber, that's all I need. I have no horn, no turn signals, just a headlight and a tail light and a brake switch.
And now the wires are all cleaned up, wrapped up, looking like a nice little wiring harness. But I gotta make one more, and I gotta show y'all one more wiring harness. And that's the wiring harness for the fan setup, the cooling setup. Now you may ask, why did I separate it and not just simply make a connection to this wiring harness? Because honestly, I want them to be separate. Best example from having these e-bikes, having really any two-wheel thing, a bicycle, e-bikes. You know, me and my family got a thing for chilling outside, talking while the weather's good. And I love to get on my bike, my e-bikes, my electric scooters, ride around throughout the neighborhood. It's daylight, you can see me, so I don't really need to waste, and it's not really using battery like that, but still, I don't want to waste the little bit of battery it is using having the headlights on or any of the lights on when I just don't need them. With the last build, I had the fans connected to the lights, so the fans only worked when the lights were on. Where this time around, if I make a separate wiring harness, the fans will work without the lights. So I can have the cooling running in case it might be a little warm out there, but I don't need the lights running. And here's how that wiring harness is looking.
Front wiring harness and the fan wiring harness. Get a nice look at them. The fans right here, these cables are done. Nice and easy. These fans are server fans and they have this wiring where they can tap into each other, so this fan I don't even have to bother this fan. I did our connections, everything works fine. Plug these two in right into my 12-volt step down, aka the terminal block. Then we plug in our power switch. I did also forget to mention that the on and off buttons to the lights and fans are indeed wired up, but I'm still hiding those from y'all.
Now I will do one unboxing simply because for the people who may have not noticed what controller I pulled out the bike earlier when we were breaking it down for painting, we're gonna unbox it right here. This is the Far Driver ND96-1800. Now, with this controller and me having a QS180 for a motor and encoder motor, I had to get the encoder controller. And the encoder controller does not have the normal wiring harness for some odd reason that the regular Hall controller has. But I don't want to use their wiring harness. I don't want to use that setup. I want to use my setup. So I crimped the needed wires out of these connections and made my own. Let me show you how I did that. So first thing first, I crimped out the 3 wires needed for the throttle. And as you can see, I have the black, red and white, and green and white cable put into your typical e-bike plastic connector. Then I cut out the orange wire from the harness, which is called the electric door. What it is your key switch wire. Now, I'm not too sure if the orange wire is a negative or a positive. For now, I'm going to assume it's a positive, and how it works is when you plug in your key switch to it, the key, when you turn it on, has a sort of connection that connects to something inside there that now sends the power through the other wire that you install, and that's when you plug that wire into your battery, and that's what allows the controller to turn on and off. And for the people who may not have a key switch right then and there, you just got the controller for testing, then I recommend you make this loop plug right here. It's another 2-prong. You just take a wire, make a loop back in, and as soon as you plug it in, the controller will have power. Now that right there is literally all you need to get the bike on and to get the bike driving. But for me, I need one more extra thing, and that is my 3-speed switch. I like to be able to just simply hit a switch to limit my power if I'm just trying to cruise, chill, and to really make sure I save battery depending on how far I'm trying to go. But with doing this, just like the 13 hours, well, not quite 13, it took me another 3 hours of sitting on the floor in the dark just like this, trying to figure out how to get it to work. The good thing is though, it actually worked. So let me show you how I did it.
The main thing right now being the 3-speed. We have our yellow for the high, ground is black, aka, if I'm correct, middle, and low is blue. Problem is, the encoder controller, you only see one ground, and that's for the goddamn throttle.
So I was about to say it, but for some reason I started rambling on about other stuff and forgot. But pretty much what I was saying is, the Hall controller has the 3 cables that are needed. The blue, the yellow, and the black, aka the ground cable. Where the encoder controller, it barely had any ground cables. All it had was the yellow and the blue. So I'm thinking, does it not need a ground cable? Well, clearly it does because it wasn't working. It wouldn't pop up on the app. So all I simply did was I plugged the 3-speed switch up to the 2 cables, the yellow and the blue. Then I unplugged my throttle and plugged the 1 pin into the negative of the throttle. And I had a 3-speed switch. So since it's quite obvious that Far Driver tried the typical corporate greed business move of forcing you to buy another item of theirs, aka give them more money, I'm going to do exactly what I did for the throttle and connect all 3 of these cables to a plastic 3-pin connector. But the only different thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to splice the negative from the throttle, pretty much turn it into a Y cable so we can split and have one negative still going to the throttle, but the negative also going to the 3-speed switch. But we're not quite done with the electrical shit just yet. There's one more thing that needs to be done, and this is very important, or else this bike's not going to move anywhere. And that is our battery lead cables.
All right, now that the bike is painted, wires are put together, everything is done and ready to go. It's about time this bike is put together so we can see the final product. Crazy. Have you watched the videos people talking about they gotta burn these rubber things out so they can put hard ones in? And I'm just now realizing after watching the video that mines are they just came out when I took my dang joints off. Eventually, I think I will replace these.
So as y'all can see, it got dark and I got tired, but I got everything I wanted on this bike. I got it a rolling chassis, so I'm gonna roll it in the garage and I'll see y'all in the morning. But before I complete this bike, I do have something I want to do. And that is something to do with this motor. Now, as you can see, they sent me some long ass cables. So it should just be a simple job of me cutting the cables down, re-crimping, and bam, it's as easy as that. Well, not quite, because they put an enamel coating on the wires. I would be crimping onto the coating, and our conductivity, if that's the right word to use, would not be great. Now, there is 3 things I could do to bypass that. 1 is acid, 2 is a lighter, fire. Now those are extremely risky, but there's a third one that isn't nearly as risky, but Damn, talk about a tedious task. That is sanding down each and every strand. So you know what? I'm not going to do any of that shit. Honestly, what annoys me the most is the wires rubbing on my legs, so I can get some zip ties and zip tie them closer to the frame to make it look neater. And the other thing that annoys me is how goddamn ugly the color combination is. It doesn't even match the bike. So I'm going to go ahead and use this wiring harness tape to cover these up, make them look neater, make them look clean. But because it's already been a minute, I don't want to waste too much more time on this. I want to get back outside to get building this bike. It's early in the morning. So we're going to try to use the magic finger snap to see if we can get it on in an instant. Let's see if this works. There we go. Look at that. Looks a lot neater. Now let's head back outside and get the finish in this bike.
Oh Lord, soon I'll be leaving.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Putting in the new battery?
Gotta get it down in a minute. It's heavy.
Sounds like a procedure, huh?
It is. We're trying to figure out how I want to get this monster of a battery in this bike. So in case this battery does want to slide, it might not because of its weight, but in case it does, I'm gonna put this door on.
And this is where I finally reveal my motorcycle control switches. And there it is. We have the one at the very bottom, which is the on and off to the cooling, the middle on and off to the lights, and the very top, high beam, low beam. Maybe it's just me, but this setup right here just looks so much better. Not only does it keep the handlebars as clean as possible, but it's a different look. The buttons actually feel great to click, and when they're on, they have a nice, very bright blue LED. But as you notice, the top bracket is cut off because, of course, like I said earlier, the Tux wiring harness was shortened due to the last dumbass button, so the bike no longer has turn signals. But again, to me, this just looks very nice. Alright, I may have been keeping a secret from you guys. Kinda. I think the hits I did were pretty goddamn obvious. But in case you may have not realized, no, this is no regular cooling system on this bike, not just some basic fans, and yes, that is a radiator. I decided to take on the challenge, another challenge with this bike, and going with water cooling. Yes, this bike is water cooled, well, the controller at least. For my first build, had straight air cooling, I mean right from the God-given air as soon as I drive, and that's all it gets. From the second bike getting a fan to the controller because that controller was overheating, to now this bike having water cooling. Now, I don't know if this far driver controller is one to get hot, but I know the city that I live in is one to get hot. I personally feel it's necessary that this controller gets cooled properly with the summer heat it's going to be getting hit with, and with the power it'll be pushing. Which is why I built this box right here and never told you what it was. Never told you what it was for.
Yes, I did build all this box just for this.
Alright, so I came across a lot of errors with this water cooling. Of course, it was a new challenge, so I had to find my way around this new challenge and get it to work. First things first, I was originally going to get a full-size aluminum block that was specifically for the far driver controller, but that was off AliExpress, didn't have enough reviews, the store didn't have enough reviews, so I didn't trust it. So I bought these two little things that I've been looking at for a long time on Amazon, and I stuck them on by these thermal conductive tape, kind of for like you to take a heat sink and stick it on some chip onto your motherboard computer software thingamajiggy, but they weren't strong enough. So I ended up getting some paste instead that is very strong. So that fixed that problem. But you know what other problem I had? A shit ton of leaking. The leaking was vicious. But you know why the leaking was vicious? Because I bought food grade tubing. Dumbass. Now, I know I said I'm no longer going to do the unboxing proportion of these type of build videos, but I just had to show y'all that yes, I do have a brain. I do know how to use it, and now I do have the correct water cooling stuff.
I'm going to cut it to length. I'm going to start on this angled part that goes from one aluminum block to the other.
Really wanted to use these elbows right here so they can really keep the tubes facing down, keep it a little bit clean, but the elbows actually fully tightened. They were just in the wrong angle. Try to use some adhesive glue. Glue didn't help out, so I had to ditch the elbows.
Hear that sound? It's working.
Now before I show y'all two final things I want to add to this bike that I think are pretty goddamn cool, I got a few things I want to replace. One, starting off with the sprocket. I don't like the OEM sprocket that came with this motor. The QS180 motor seems a little extra loose, so I end up getting the same company sprocket that I got from my last build, Project SB Original, and it's not a whole bunch tighter, but it's a little tighter on the shaft. The old one just shakes too much, and I don't want that to start eating and tearing up the shaft teeth after a while.
The new sprocket will get rid of that, at least majority of it, that is not nearly as loose.
But not only that, I had got some new bolts and screws for the door panel. The 2 lock screws, I flipped them, put some nylon locks on the other side because they were poking onto the battery. And same for the 2 door hinge screws. They were too long, so I got some shorter ones, and it all worked out great. And for the final things I wanted to show and add to this bike, this one right here specifically was supposed to be a 2-piece thing. I got these very nice looking little blue valve stem caps, but with the blue valve stem caps, I bought a chrome Harley crown gas tank cap. It was this one right here, looked real nice. Problem is, this is for a OEM Harley Sportster. I have a eBay Harley Sportster gas tank, therefore it just didn't fit, and it sucks because it looked so damn nice. But there is now one more thing that I need to add to this bike before I can say it's finished. And that is the mini license plate. Now, no, it is not real, but this one right here is inspired by Mr. Central Driver. First video I ever seen of his was the Onyx RCR video when I thought my Project Flash motor was overheating when it turns out I was killing the battery. But I came across his Surron videos, and that's when I saw he put this plate on, and I thought, you know what, for a whole motorcycle like this, people are never going to expect it to be electric. So to drive around with this little license plate, I think it'd be pretty funny, and it starts to throw people off. So let's add this thing on so we can finally say this bike is done. And that is finally it, ladies and gentlemen. Sheesh, this was literally a movie. But we're not ending it quite there. I'm mainly doing this little outro because usually we got the build, then we do the review, and after the review we just take the bike everywhere. But this time around we're gonna have something that's gonna be interrupting that. So like I said before, I'm trying to come back bigger and better. So not only did I come back with a bigger bike, I'm trying to come back better with 2 new cameras, up in the production a bit. So no, it won't quite be e-bike related, but I think it'll be a great video to do, especially to help out people who are trying to do motovlogging themselves and can't figure out what camera they want. But I think it's about time I end it here and stop talking because I've been doing a whole lot of that. This video is long enough. If y'all enjoyed this, make sure you go ahead and like, comment, and hit that subscribe button to get electrified with the rest of the people. Become electric with the rest of the people. It has been me. I'm out. It's a girl best